Meeting is called to order. This is a town council meeting, special public meeting for September 28, 2021. Pledge of allegiance and a moment of silence.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. In your prayers at home, please remember the Astor family in Dyer. Randy Astor passed away. He's the husband of the clerk treasurer in Dyer, Deb Astor. So, good man, good family. Contributed a lot to the community, so remember them in your prayers. Roll call.
Robert Carnahan.
Here.
Norman is absent. Ralph Miller.
Present.
Colleen Sheehan. Here. Richard Sharp.
Here.
Julia Rivera is absent. Randy Niemeyer.
Present.
I am present. Rick Everly.
Present.
David Austin is absent.
Okay, we have public comment on agenda items.
Ms. Joan Dixon, 8711 West 132nd Place. I know it's a public hearing today for the budget. When I called to see if I could get a copy of it so I could review it for the public hearing, it wasn't available. So how's that procedure going to work today? Are you going to have figures presented now at the meeting and then we can ask questions?
Yes, there's, under the public hearing for the budget, there's another section for public comment.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. President, if I may, the notice to taxpayers is also duly noticed, and it can be found on budgetnotices.in.gov. All budget forms can be found there once they are submitted.
Okay.
Yeah, once they're submitted. It wasn't submitted as of today.
The notice to taxpayers was, which has budget estimates.
Right, it wasn't submitted today. I called because I thought there was a problem with the website, but there wasn't. It's just they said it wasn't submitted.
Okay, well, whoever you spoke with must have given wrong information because we cannot hold this public hearing unless the notice to
Well, that's what I thought,
duly
and that's
noticed.
why I made a call.
So-
Once I called here, they didn't have any information here. Then I called, she told me to go to Gateway,
Yeah, if you go on the Gateway
right? And I
website,
did, and it said not submitted for Cedar Lake, it's not
so
Cedar Lake.
if you go to in.gov and search budget notices, it will be found under there.
Okay,
Because
thank
I
you.
was on that website earlier today and it is there.
Okay, this is about 2:30. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment on agenda items? Third call for public comment on agenda items. Public comment is closed. We have a public hearing, ordinance 1399, year 2022 budget. This is the first reading. Madam Clerk Treasurer, would you read by its title, please? And then we'll go through the gateway notice, then your introduction.
Do you want me to read it first?
Yeah, just the title, and then your gateway notice, then the introduction.
Okay, so ordinance number 1399, be it resolved by the Cedar Lake Town Council that for the expenses of Cedar Lake Civil Town for the year ending December 31st, 2022, the sums herein specified are hereby appropriated in order to set apart out of the several funds herein named and for the purposes herein specified, subject to the laws governing the same, such sums herein appropriated shall be held to include all expenditures authorized to be made during the year unless otherwise expressly stipulated and provided for by law. In addition, for the purposes of raising revenue to meet the necessary expenses of Cedar Lake Civil Town, the property tax levies and property tax rates as herein specified are included herein. Budget Form 4B for all funds must be completed and submitted in the manner prescribed by the Department of Local Government Finance. The ordinance shall be in full force and effect from and after its passage and approval by the Cedar Lake Town Council. So,
Thank you. Gateway notice?
the gateway notice, as I said previously, was submitted on September 17th on the budget notices as prescribed and ordered by the Department of Local Government Finance, and the public hearing can proceed.
Thank you. Introduction, Clerk Treasurer.
Council, this was a another year that had a lot of great conversation when it comes to the budget and what our plans are for the future moving forward. We had a lot of council affairs meetings, a lot of discussions with department heads. Our financial advisor, Corby Thompson, is with us tonight to give a presentation. I mean, his work, yet again, for the second year in a row, has just been absolutely helpful and wonderful for everybody to understand and for us to really plan as we move forward. So with that, if I can, I'd like to turn it over to Corby.
Okay, we're down to presentation. We have Corby Thompson with O.W. Cronin Associates. Corby, the floor is yours.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for that introduction as well, and those kind words there, Jennifer. In front of the council, they've got a little presentation, as well as some of the department heads, of some of the key changes and major updates to the budget for 2022. When we are kind of talking about revenues and the appropriations that are changing within this budget, it's really in comparison to 2021. But also in certain circumstances, we're looking at the sustainability plan that was put together. That was kind of the longer-term look at the finances, so we tried best to match up the 22 budget with what was in that plan, but we do know that the town's growth, and just because of general needs, we have pushed beyond some of those items in the sustainability plan on the revenue side and the appropriation side. And like I mentioned, as we go through this, I will comment on some of those items. With that being said, we can kind of go ahead and look at that first slide there. That's just kind of a historic look at your cash balances, some of the major...
Can we put the slides up so that people out here can see them?
Sorry,
Yeah, we
that's
can do
my
that.
fault, Ralph.
That way our viewers at home see what we're seeing.
I'm behind.
There we go. Go ahead and go to that next slide.
Good?
Yep.
Okay.
So kind of what you see here, this is just a historic look at some of the major fund cash balances. The main reason I include that is just to kind of paint a picture of how the town has been doing recently. You know, just taking a look at this, you can see most of those major funds are seeing either kind of, you know, level cash balances or are increasing. In particular, the general fund, you've seen some growth in your cash balance there. There's quite a big jump from 19 to 2020. The biggest two factors in there would be the fact that you guys got your CARES Act reimbursement that paid for a bunch of the public safety payroll during that year. In addition to that, though, you also have been receiving a lot of building and planning fees for the developments that the town has going on right now. So that's kind of why you see those major jumps. You can also see a big jump just from last year's year end to June 30th this year. And again, that is almost entirely in part due to just the amount of building and planning fees that the town's been receiving in those developments. One thing I do want to mention as we look at this, though, these are cash balances and the month that you receive your tax distributions. So this is really kind of a better look at those balances. You know, they kind of fall until you then receive that tax distribution. So just keep in mind this is kind of more of a rosy picture here. On the next slide, I just kind of want to touch on some of the revenues. It's similar to the slide I kind of showed last year, but again, you know, a lot of the revenues are kind of given, or I should say determined at a different level of government, whether that's the county or the state. There are some things that the town has control over, but they have much more control over the appropriations than they do the actual revenues. Some updates for 22 in comparison to 21 would be, we anticipate and have budgeted for some additional fire response fees. Chief believes we can generate about $60,000 in additional revenues there, and we will be looking to use those to help pay for some of the additional firefighters that we'll get to when we get to the appropriations. But that would be kind of a new revenue stream for 22. We also have increased EMS billing fees in comparison to the 21 budget and the sustainability plan. It's generating about $70,000 over what we had previously budgeted. So then that revenue stream will also be utilized for public safety personnel. The last thing I want to mention would just be your building and planning fees. That's been a huge revenue stream for the town. A large part of that is used to help, provide the services that are required with all the growth that the town's going through. But at the same time, we know that that's not a revenue stream that we can rely on forever. In an ideal world, we do, but we know development may slow, and we want to prepare for that if that is the case. The last thing I want to mention would just be COVID impacts. We're still seeing some negative impacts from COVID. Hopefully within the next couple of years we kind of get past that, or at least get to a new norm, something that we can kind of look back at and just assume that this is the new normal. The one thing I didn't mention as far as revenues go would be the 3-year growth appeal. Once again, the town is qualified for a 3-year growth appeal, and that again is because you guys have exceeded the state average growth by more than 2%. You can see your 3-year average growth right now is 6.84% in your certified net assessed value. That's well above the 4.3%, which is the automatic increase that you get. You guys will get an additional 2.5% or so on your current levy. Granted, the DLGF gives it to us. As I mentioned, $71,181. We anticipate and have made the argument within the 3-year growth appeal resolution that we need that money for public safety personnel. So that is our argument there. If we don't get that money, we may have to revisit the budget and determine whether or not we really can't afford these additional officers. This is additional levy, but it's not intended to increase the tax rate. The whole point of receiving this levy is so that you can keep your tax rate relatively level and provide those additional services that are required for your growing population and residents here in the town. On the next slide, I think I had this slide in there last year just to mention, that growth isn't always, doesn't have only good, cash impacts. There are more services and things that the town needs to provide as a result of that as well. So these are just kind of some of the things you need to think about. And now I'm going to kind of talk about the appropriations. And as I mentioned, this is kind of the side of the budget that we do have more control over. Anything that we budget is really ultimately up to the town and the council members here in front of us. So I'll kind of just dive in here. So we've got some increased salary and wages for police and fire officers. That is to say that they will be receiving a 3% cost of living adjustment, and we will also be hiring 2 additional firefighters, one at the beginning of the year, the second one to come as long as we can get a revenue stream to provide for that. It also provides for 1 additional police officer and a part-time code enforcement officer. The 23 full-time officers, that will basically keep the town at its level that they've historically had as far as a ratio of residents to police officers, and same with the fire personnel. Currently there's only 12. Historically there's been about 1 per 1,000 people. That 2020 census is going to be released soon, or maybe already has, and I would anticipate that the town's going to be right around that 14,000.
It was released, and then we're at 14,106, and we may appeal that.
Okay, well, there we go. One other thing I want to mention, as far as public safety officers go, the town is applying for some SAFER grants. That basically would allow the town to hire some additional firefighters or police officers. That would be, their cost would essentially be granted 80%. However, I want to note that because if we do receive those grants, it's great that we have those salaries and wages paid for the next 3 years, but as those grants fall off, you are required to maintain that same staffing level, and if that is the case, we will just want to make sure that we do some analysis and make sure that we can ultimately sustain that either by additional revenue stream or reduction of appropriations elsewhere. So I just do want to make a note of that. One big thing I do want to mention regarding the 2 additional firefighters, that will allow for 2 ambulances to be ran at all times. I know that's very important to achieve, as well as the council, to make sure that appropriate public safety is provided for its residents. So that is a big benefit of having those 14 full-time firefighters. One of the things that the council wanted to look at this year was making sure that they get some of their key position personnel kind of up to par or more in line with what we kind of saw within the AIM salary survey. So I'm just going to kind of go through some of those increases there. For the clerk treasurer department, we've got about a 15% increase in pay for the clerk treasurer and deputies. We've got about 10% increase for the remaining staff within that department. And again, those are essentially to get them to a comparable level of similar sized communities or similarly located communities. We did eliminate a part-time position within that the clerk treasurer department, so that will help mitigate some of those increased costs there. Planning, zoning, and building department, we've got the building administrator, the building coordinator, and the building inspector pay increases of about 9% for those positions. Similar story to the clerk treasurer's department, we're just getting them up to a competitive pay. We don't want to be losing any of those folks to surrounding communities or somebody else. So that's the intention there. Other updates for salaries and wages would just include a part-time parks and recreation coordinator. Previously, we had not budgeted for one. We are bringing that position back. We are also establishing a 4-member park board. And then the only other major change I really want to discuss would be the hiring of a full-time custodian. If that custodian is currently part-time, we're going to make that position full-time. So on this slide, this is kind of an explanation of where and how we're going to fund those increased appropriations over 2021 budget amounts. You've got an overall general fund budget increase of about $570,000, 10.8%. We've got total levy increase when you take the 3-year growth appeal plus your standard 4.3%. We've got about $190,000 growth in your levy. Those increases will primarily fund the additional public safety officers we mentioned. We also have the increased EMS and fire protection charges that I mentioned. Those will also be going towards the payment of those public safety officers. And lastly, we've got increased planning, zoning, and building permits and fees of $300,000. In the sustainability plan and previously budgeted, we had about $1 million or $1.2 million. We anticipate $1.5 million next year in the budget. I think this year you're well over that already. So again, that number may be low, but again, we don't want to overestimate that number as we are essentially relying on those funds at least for next year. And those again will help cover some of those key position pay increases, get that parks department kind of reestablished, and then also provide for some of the capital or kind of one-time costs related to the planning, zoning, and building department. So that's the general fund. Again, that's by far the biggest fund. You know, it's about half of the total amounts that get budgeted. So, you know, just making sure that we try to budget for some kind of level cash flow there is important, and we have done that in this budget. Some of the other funds I want to hit on, we've got MVH and LRS here. We've got some salary and wage increases for the leadership positions within the Public Works Department. And those increases kind of vary between 5 and 11% based upon the positions identified. I do want to mention, though, that while some of those salaries and wages get paid out of MVH, they primarily are paid out of the utilities. I do just want to include that in the budget, though, because you know, if we're approving that in this budget for even just a portion of the MVH funds to be used for payment of those public works individuals, we need to make sure that that the utilities can handle those increases as well. Other employees within public works that are not considered leadership positions by title, we're seeing cost of living adjustment of 3%. Other than salary and wages, we've got increased supplies budget of about $12,000 within MVH. That is primarily just a result of increased needs. This winter was quite tough, or spring as well. On the public works budget this year, there's just a lot of weather, a lot of things that needed to get maintained, so an additional $12,000 there will really help Tim out. MVH restricted, that $227,440 that we have identified in the budget is for those preservation, construction, and reconstruction projects. Those are all payable from the MVH restricted fund. For budgeting purposes, it's all combined, but I did want to note that we do have that half of the MVH distribution set aside, which is mandated by state statute. The LRS budget, we have an increase of about $55,000. We've got $20,000 in additional salt costs, again, just because of general weather and things that kind of happened this year. We want to make sure that we have enough for that. And we've also provided an additional $50,000 in contractual services or contracted maintenance, just for general plowing and mowing as it's kind of needed by Tim. You know, if he's short-staffed or just physically can't get the work done with his crew, he now has the ability to go out and hire some individuals to help him out there. Next, we've got the cumulative funds. The CCD fund we kind of just use as an equipment replacement fund. So really, anytime the town needs new vehicles or equipment, the first place they're going to turn is to this fund. So some of the items that are currently being paid out of there would be the 2019 fire truck lease, the 19 fire squads, the estimated lease payments on the 22 police squads, and then there's also a new ambulance lease and equipment lease that is provided in that budget. The remaining appropriations are kind of just set aside as allowances for the department heads. You know, if there's some kind of equipment that they need, or if there's another vehicle that they need, those allowances have been kind of set aside by there. Those will change by year to year. This year's were kind of just based upon some of the needs that were at least identified by the department heads. CCI budget really has no major changes. It's really not a whole lot of revenue there, but we do budget some of the IT costs and things of that nature out of that fund. Next, we have the local income tax funds. We've got the local income tax economic development fund, and we have the local income tax public safety fund. We've got the economic development. We have the 2015 road project debt service costs that are paid out of there. So a good portion of that budget is for those debt service payments. We also have $90,000 identified just as general professional fees for things that are yet to be identified and things that they just kind of arise that you need those monies for. It's kind of set aside within that fund for those purposes. We also have $302,000 budgeted for special projects within the sustainability plan. That was one of the items to kind of get the eco project further along, essentially. The LIP public safety money is used entirely to pay a portion of the PSAP contract. For 2022, we budgeted $250,000 out of that fund, but I do want to also mention that there's $150,000 also payable out of the general fund for that contract. So got about $400,000 total in that PSAP contract. Those costs have just been kind of increasing over the last several years. And I think we might want to take a look at exactly what we're being charged for there. We kind of had a brief conversation of, what are you being charged for, and we didn't really have a good answer for that, so I think we should probably look into that a little bit further, but we have budgeted $400,000 for 2022. Some of the other funds I just want to hit on here, we've got the casino gaming fund. We've seen the revenues throughout the state drop by an estimated 48%. I don't believe Lake County's impact will quite be that, but we do anticipate less revenue than historically received. As a result, we had $227,000 identified in the Highland subdivision for road improvements. We can only budget $206,192 for 22. Now, if there's leftover casino appropriations at the end of this year, there will be some additional funds available, but we would ultimately have to do an additional appropriation to spend anything above that $206,192. You do have two debt service funds that are payable with levy. Essentially, we just levy what the next debt service payments will be. It's a little bit more than what we had previously budgeted in 21, so we will see a very slight increase in the tax rate. That is completely attributable to an increased debt service levy. So I just want to make a note of that. The redevelopment general fund, there was really no major changes. Got that slide twice. The last slide is just kind of a look at the impact on the taxpayers here. You can see going back to 2017, the town had a tax rate of about 81 cents. By 21, that had dropped all the way down to 58 cents. And again, that is just a function of the fact that you guys have that increasing assessed value. In 22, like I mentioned, we do see that tax rate going up by about 4 or 5 cents there. But again, that is because of increased debt service levy. The controlled levy that you guys do have is almost identical to what we anticipate for 21. So that's all I really have for a presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Well, let's go through our procedure here, and then we'll come back for council discussion.
Okay.
So let the record show that we already had the reading of ordinance 1399 to open the public hearing, so we will forego that again. We'll move on to public comment. Mrs. Dixon?
I just have a question. You are budgeting for more fire and police. What does a new fireman or a policeman cost? Insurance, do you have an idea what that position costs?
$85,000.
For fire? And then what about police?
Close to $100,000.
Thank
The
you.
last time we did it was like 97.
For one?
Right.
I just wanna make sure.
In total.
Right, and all the insurance, everything. Yep, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment on the budget? Any other public comment? Okay, public comment is closed. We'll have town council discussion. Council.
Question. why couldn't this stuff been delivered to me prior to this meeting? It's being placed in front of me, and I haven't had an opportunity to look it over. Couldn't it been delivered, like Friday or something?
Yeah, if we had discussion of whether or not we wanted to have a public introduction of the budget, at previous council affairs committees, we ultimately decided to forego that, and just go straight to the public hearing. If you would like to have this in the future, even if we don't have an introduction prior, we'd be happy to provide that to you.
I don't know really what's in this, because it was just sat here tonight, so it would have been nice if I could have had it like on Friday to look it over.
Okay, yeah, we'll make sure in the future to get you things ahead of time if we don't have that introduction.
Yeah, I agree with Bob. I think it's helpful also to have it posted on our website too, although it's only a first reading. Transparency is key to long-term success here, so I think that those are two things we can improve upon a little bit.
Yeah, one thing I could just suggest maybe you do, if because it does sound like there are people concerned with what's in that budget, when we submit the...
Could you speak into the microphone so
Yes.
people online can hear you, Corby?
In the future, when we submit the Form 3, which is the notice for this meeting here, what we could do is publish the Form 1s that ultimately make up that notice. That way, anybody could kind of just see at least what the appropriation budgets are. I wouldn't want to bog everybody down with the revenues and the miscellaneous things like that, because as I mentioned, those are more given. So that's just kind of
After
something we
tonight's
could do.
meeting, if this passes on first reading, I would suggest though that let's give all the information, right, even the revenues and those things that might bog people down. I think the public wants that type of access.
We can do that. In order to get that Form 3 submitted, you do basically have to have all of the forms filled out to some degree, so that is something we can provide.
Yeah, between now and the final reading, it's good that there's some time.
Yep.
If we've got everything posted online where people can digest it and ask any questions, contact any of us. I think we all see government all around us on TV that is not real transparent. And I sure want to keep local government something that people can access.
Yep.
So, any other council discussion on the budget? I think there's a item to note here that I don't know if we discussed it a lot in our budget, in our committee meetings. But being in business, I'm seeing it a lot where people I work with, my consultants, my vendors, all their costs are going up. They got to pay their help more. You know, the cost of doing business is more. I think we're going to need to possibly look at and talk to our engineering consultants, our economic development consultants, which is Meredith, our town attorney. All of those people, I think we need to, before we adopt the budget, kind of get our heads wrapped around what their increases are going to be, because I suspect that they're going to be substantial. Now, granted, with the engineering, a good bit of it's going to be utility related. Some of the engineering is going to be planning, building, and zoning. A good bit of the attorney work that we do here is planning, building, and zoning. So there are ways to make sure that we have the revenue streams to support it, but I think we need to get some accurate numbers before we adopt the budget to make sure that we're considering those things.
You want to find out about their proposed rates.
Yes.
And obviously, the total amount we pay them is dependent on the hours we use them, and that will vary. No one's going to be able to predict that accurately, but we need to know if rates are going to
by percentage, right, what their rates are going up, so we can at least somewhat have an estimate of where we're going to land, and then be able to parcel out utility funds, redevelopment funds, general fund expenditures, and the like, based on those percentage increases.
In the budget, we do have some
Well, I didn't mention your firm either, because I'm sure that O.W. Crone is not getting cheaper either. I mean, we're all kind of facing that upward pressure.
Right. We have, within the budget, increased almost all of the professional fees, where if there was payment previously for professional fees out of that department or that fund, we did get some increases in almost all of those categories.
But let's just make sure that
Yeah.
we're substantial enough, because, I mean, I know personally in business, I made a substantial rate increase to my customers this year. It's not easy, but it's the cost of doing business right now. The inflation is through the roof, so it's just a matter of keeping up. So those are things I think before we adopt the budget, we need to get a really good handle on. But other than that, I'll say that this process in working with Crone over the last, 12 months, well, more than that, probably 16 months, it's been a very good relationship, a good fit for the town of Cedar Lake. I think that everybody here now has a better understanding of how all of it works. You know, I felt good about the input that our department heads gave and how we were able to respond to those requests and needs in ways that's backed up by revenue. And we're not just trying to put out wish lists, we have business strategies to solve problems. So I'm pretty excited about the progress we're making. I always think back to my first year on the council. I remember halfway through the year, we gave the police officers each a $5,000 raise because we were the lowest paid department in Lake County. And then going into that 2012 budget, we budgeted for an extra officer, which brought us up to 15. There's a little bit of progress that's been made in that time, so it's, and in 2013, when we started with the fire department, we had 6 full-time and the chief. And so we talked about it back then in 2013, Chief, getting those 2 ambulances going around the clock. And here we are. You know, we're finally at that point. So thank you to the taxpayers of this community. We have tremendous people living here that pay their taxes, and they're good citizens. So I appreciate the hard work that people put in every day that provides the opportunity for us as your elected representatives to appropriate your money in a fashion that serves you in the best and most efficient way. So we're very pleased to be living in a community like this with so many good neighbors. Any other council discussion? Okay, town council decision on first reading. Is there a motion to approve or disapprove?
I make a motion to approve the 2022 budget.
First reading?
First reading.
Thank you. Motion by Mr. Sharp. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Miller. Any other questions or discussion on the motion? Roll call?
Robert Carnahan?
No.
Ralph Miller?
Yes.
Colleen Scheven? Yes. Richard Sharp?
Yes.
Randy Neimeyer?
Yes, motion carries 4-1. First reading is approved. When will the second reading be, Jen?
At the October 19th meeting will be the adoption.
Okay, thank you. And please note for the record that we would like, once the forms are submitted, for there to be a posting of what we just approved on the first reading online so people can digest all the details.
Noted, and I will work with Corby and Cliff to make it happen.
Thank you very much. I just believe a budget shouldn't be something people should have to make a public records request for. It's pretty important that taxpayers can access their budget.
It's definitely one of those things where they give you the fund total budget when you get the budget notice, but how good is that really, I guess, you know?
A lot of numbers.
And I think that with the internet, people are a lot smarter than they used to be as far as being able to understand how all of this works, because they can pull up any one of these meetings, right? We shouldn't underestimate the ability of our neighbors to understand and also ask us questions. And that's a great thing. And I know Mary Joan, when we post this, will be pouring through every detail, and I suppose others will be as well, and that's good. We need that. All right, thank you. We move on to resolution. Item 1 is Resolution 1290, Excess Levy Appeal Petition. Ms. Sandberg, if you would read by its title only, and then Mr. Thompson, a brief explanation.
Resolution number 1290, a resolution authorizing an appeal to the Department of Local Government Finance for relief from the limitation of tax levies established by Indiana law.
Thank you. Corby?
Yes.
Explain how this works.
Yes, so as I kind of mentioned earlier, you guys qualify for a 3-year excess levy growth appeal, and what that means is you exceeded the state average growth by more than 2%. So whatever your what the town's 3-year average growth is over the automatic of 4.3% this year, you guys get that in additional levy. This year it comes out to $1,181. Within that resolution, you essentially provide certain information to DLGF that Jennifer has to certify, and then we also need to make an argument of why we need those funds. So Exhibit B to that resolution, there's kind of just an explanation of the town needs this money in order to pay for these public safety officers, in particular a firefighter, to be able to run those 2 ambulances at all times. I think that's a pretty good argument that the DLGF will understand, so.
I don't think our funds are being wasted.
No.
What was that number again?
$71,181.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
You've heard the reading of Resolution 1290, and an explanation. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll make the motion to approve.
Motion by Mr. Miller. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Ms. Sheehan. Questions or discussion? Roll call.
Robert Carnahan?
Yes.
Ralph Miller?
Yes.
Colleen Scheven?
Yes.
Richard Sharp?
Yes.
Randy Neimeyer?
Yes, motion carries 5-0. We have one item of new business, is Summer Winds Commercial Variance of Use for Outdoor Dining to allow 4 tables with 4 seats at 4 different restaurants in Summer Winds Commercial Development. This received a favorable recommendation at the September 15, 2021 Plan Commission meeting.
Mr. President, we need to make a correction. That was actually at the September 9th Board of Zoning Appeals meeting, as this was a variance request.
Let the record reflect the comments of the town manager that this was a September 9th BZA meeting where it received a favorable recommendation. Thank you, Mr. Everly. The floor is yours if you would like to offer a little information.
I would actually defer to Ms. Murr. She has provided the certification for you this
Thank you.
evening. I believe each of you has a copy of that, and as you know, Ms. Murr is our planning director and attends those meetings as staff person assigned to the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Can you get a little close to a microphone so everybody can hear you? Thank you.
At your September 9th BZA meeting, a favorable recommendation was certified to the town council for the variance of use to allow the outdoor dining with alcohol, 4 tables with 4 seats each at each of the 4 restaurant locations on the lot in the PUD zoning district, that PUD zoning district being Summer Winds Plaza, Lot 1. Bollards being installed according to town standards, and that this variance of use approval will supplement the existing PUD document. When that PUD was originally discussed and negotiated, outdoor dining hadn't been considered, and with the effects of COVID, outdoor dining is pretty much everywhere now. So this comes to you with a 5-0 favorable recommendation from the BZA.
Mr. Carnahan, you attend the meetings. Any highlights of that discussion?
Yes, I would just say that everywhere you go, I visit Valpo because of my daughter being there, and there are seats and chairs out everywhere. And this, I think, is something that we need to allow here in Cedar Lake.
Yeah, and if I remember in watching the meeting of the BZA, they were really big on those ballards because of it being outdoor seating in a parking lot. A lot of the outdoor seating you see like in Valpo and Crown Point is along streets where there's a sidewalk. So in a parking lot, there's not necessarily that buffer. So I think that was an important part of the discussion for the BZA was that protection for the people sitting outside. But I agree, Bob.
And the discussion was that we had a vehicle crash in at BP, and then we had one crash in at Walgreens, and so these are needed to protect the people that are out there using those tables and chairs.
That goes ways,
Disagree.
Burger King.
Dental office, Burger King, and we had one drive off 129th today, so.
It happens often.
West side or east side of?
Area.
Right down from your house,
Oh,
sir.
yeah?
Yeah,
Pe-
out into the swamp.
People hit the wrong pedal or they're not paying attention, and all of a sudden we've got problems.
Yep.
So, Mr. President, those
Yes.
bollards are installed, have been inspected, and they're all in place, so they've met that condition.
Anybody have any questions for Mr. Lambert? He's the petitioner, he's here with us tonight. Okay. We have a favorable recommendation from the BZA of 5 in favor, 0 against. Is there a motion by the council on the favorable recommendation of the BZA with the findings of fact?
I will make a motion for Summer Winds Commercial variance of use for outdoor dining to allow 4 tables with 4 seats at 4 different restaurants in Summer Winds Commercial Development.
Thank you. Motion by Mr. Carney, is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Ms. Sheehan. Questions or discussion? Roll call.
Robert Simon,
Yes.
Ralph Miller,
Yes.
Colleen Scheven.
Yes.
Richard Sharp.
Yes.
Randy Nemeyer.
Yes, motion carries 5-0. Thank you, Brad.
Thank you.
Okay, we move to public comments. Mary Jo?
One quick question. Refresh my memory, who serves on the public affairs, the council affairs?
It's myself, Mr. Sharp, and Mr. Miller.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other public comments? Third call for public comment. Public comments closed.
I would like to ask Brett, you got a new Mexican restaurant coming in there?
Yes,
And it's, I heard it's La Quesadilla, but I see a different name on the building.
it's the same owner, they just wanted to, brand it under a different name.
Fantastic.
Huh?
Fantastic.
Yeah, so it's going to be,
It's great
yeah,
food.
it's called Padilla, hopefully, and hopefully get them open here, by Halloween.
I'll tell you, we're gonna have between the new one in Brad's Plaza and La Gaviota, a couple of excellent Mexican restaurants here. La Gaviota's great.
Mm-hmm.
Man, they're doing a bang-up job, so it's good to have some food like that in town. Any other comments by council? Thank you. Our next council public meeting will be Tuesday, October 12th at 6 p.m. This is another special public meeting.
It is.
And then our regularly scheduled council meeting will be October 19th at 7 p.m., preceded by a utility board meeting. This meeting is adjourned.